Welcome to Australia at the end of 2024. Neo-Nazis so emboldened, they not only feel at home spewing their vile Jew hatred and bigotry in public, but on the very steps of the Victorian Parliament. About 20 of them marched on Spring Street, holding a banner reading "Jews hate freedom," spouting their menacing message for close to 4 minutes.
This country should not belong to the Jews. It should belong to the white Australian people that built it. White man! White man! White man! White man! Freedom for the white man! The Jews must go! Freedom for the white man! The Jews must go!
And just because it's so important to expose who these people are, here's more from a clip the group's leader Joel Davis posted himself to X.
Why does 0.4% of the Australian population, the Jews, in the dictate of the Victorian government, what our freedoms should and should not be? I tell you why. Because of the money and power Jews have over our political system.
There were brave Australians who stood up to these bigots, heroes who called out these cowards for what they are. And I can exclusively reveal tonight, Victoria Police have executed a search warrant at an address in Wantirna South in relation to the anti-Semitic sign, and a number of items were seized. Yet, no arrests have been made. Police are still investigating. I have so many questions. Why didn't Parliament's own security move on these thugs? Why no arrests after 3 days? 3 days since their leader Joel Davis helpfully identified himself for authorities. The Australian has described Mr. Davis in July as an emerging figure on the far right, whose social media reach had skyrocketed since October 7, as has his anti-Semitism. Yet the police response gave the impression that catching him and his followers seemed all a bit too hard.
Security at the Parliament House called for backup, and then as soon as the police arrived, the men all ran off and dispersed into Fitzroy Gardens.
Even the Victorian opposition took a swipe. After being too distracted lately with false accusations its own former party member Moira Deeming associates with Nazis.
How is it right that we can have people wander up the steps of Parliament, roll out a banner, spew hatred for over 3.5 minutes, wander off and still be on the streets today?
I was very concerned to see officers not responding to this in the way we need them to respond.
It's also unclear why federal police haven't taken full carriage of this, despite all the fanfare in Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's big announcement that there would be an anti-Semitism task force earlier this month following the firebombing of the Adass Synagogue in Melbourne. As former Treasurer and Australia's most senior Jewish politician tweeted, this is what Victoria has become. Days after a synagogue was firebombed, hooded thugs openly promoting Jew hate on the steps of our parliament. This government has failed yet again to protect our community. It's a disgrace. To truly understand how we got to this point as the year draws to a close, we need to consider how the government has paved the way for these exact incidents in the past 15 months. Almost immediately after the October 7 attacks in Israel, the first response from our Foreign Minister Penny Wong was to urge restraint and protection of civilian lives. The onus was immediately placed on the Jewish state, which had just been subjected to the worst terror attack in its history. And this truly set the tone for the government's shocking treatment of Israel and its negligence on the anti-Semitism that's been spiralling out of control since. From the increasingly hostile motions it supported at the United Nations to the failure of authorities to act on Islamic hate preachers, let alone the many other brazen acts of Jew hatred and extremism that we've reported right here on this network. The Prime Minister acknowledges statements like "from the river to the sea" are violent, yet the slogan isn't outlawed. Instead, chanted openly, tauntingly on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne weekly and across university campuses for months. Mr Albanese announces a tokenistic special envoy for anti-Semitism and has the chutzpah to announce one for Islamophobia in the same speech. And he took days to call the firebombing of the Melbourne synagogue a terror attack, and even longer to get to the scene of the crime. Hey, he was too busy playing tennis in Perth.
I had 6 appointments on Saturday. After they had concluded late in the afternoon, I did some exercise. That's what people do.
The Victorian government hasn't been much better. Premier Jacinta Allen has also been criticised for taking too long to respond to the synagogue attack. She was even more reluctant than the Prime Minister to admit it was terrorism. And unlike here in New South Wales, protesters don't need permits to rally in Victoria. And they've been doing so, often with Hamas and Hezbollah symbols openly displayed for more than a year. Meanwhile, there's been a 316% increase in anti-Jewish incidents in the year to September 30 compared to the previous year. More than 2,000 incidents have been reported, according to the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. But why should anyone accept Jews' care? Well, obviously, it's simply the morally right thing to do to stand up to Nazis and anti-Semites. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Indifference, staying silent, that's how the Holocaust happened. But Jews are the canaries in the coal mine. These far-right and far-left thugs, and they are two sides of the same coin. First they come for the Jews, then it's others. They hate our freedoms, they hate democracy, they thrive on social discord and violence. And as detestable and sickening as neo-Nazis are, at least they don't try to conceal their Jew hatred. They don't hide behind words like Zionists instead of Jews, Israel instead of Judaism. The least you can say about them is they're honest about their anti-Semitism. And now it's time for our governments to be honest about how we ended up here in the first place.